You know, I always thought retirement would be peaceful. 30 years in the military, then 20 running my own business. I earned my quiet time by this lake. But that peace was shattered the day I found a $10,000 fine taped to my front door. All because of a simple shed I built to store my fishing gear. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that's gone power mad, you'll want to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Share your own HOA horror stories in the comments. I read every single one. Let me take you back to how this all started. My name's Jim, and I've lived in Lake Serenity Estate since '92. Back then, this place was paradise. Neighbors knew each other. We had block parties. The HOA existed to maintain property values, sure, but they were reasonable folks who understood that a community is made of people, not just rules. I built my shed in '94. Nothing fancy, just a 10x12 structure to keep my fishing equipment. Lawn tools and holiday decorations safe from the elements. Got it approved by the HOA at the time, paid my $25 permit fee, and that was that. For 27 years, that shed stood there without a single complaint. Then in 2021, things changed. New people started moving in. Folks with money who wanted this lakeside community to be their personal paradise. Rules be damned. And they got themselves elected to the HOA board. The new board president, let's call her Mrs. Harrington, was the worst. She'd moved in 3 years ago, built a massive deck that clearly violated setback rules, but somehow got it retroactively approved. Meanwhile, she started nitpicking everything as long-time residents did. First came the warning letters. My mailbox was 2 inches too short. My lawn had one too many dandelions. My flagpole wasn't the approved style. I fixed these minor issues without complaint, figuring it wasn't worth the fight. Then came the letter about my shed. Violation. Non-compliant structure. Original permit expired. Structure does not meet current architectural guidelines. Fine, $10,000. Remove or bring into compliance within 30 days. $10,000 for a shed that had been standing longer than Mrs. Harrington had lived in this state. I called the HOA office. A young-sounding man answered, clearly new to the job. Can you explain this fine? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. I've had this shed for nearly 30 years with no issues. Sir, the permit was only valid for 10 years according to our current bylaws, he said, reading from a script. It should have been renewed. That rule wasn't in place when I built it, I pointed out. You can't apply new rules to old structures. I'm sorry, sir, but the board has determined that all structures must comply with current regulations. The fine stands. I requested a hearing, as was my right. The date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I did some digging. I found my original permit from 1994, signed by the then HOA president. I also discovered something interesting. The original covenants for Lake Serenity Estates, written when the community was founded, contained a clause about grandfathered structures. You wouldn't believe what they did next. 3 days before my hearing, I came home to find Mrs. Harrington herself on my property, measuring my shed with a tape measure. "What are you doing?" I asked, getting out of my truck. "Just documenting the violation, Jim," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This structure is even larger than we thought. 10.5 feet by 12.5 feet. That's another violation. It's always been that size," I said. "The original permit lists the exact dimensions." "Well, those permits are no longer valid," she said, walking toward me. "You really should just remove this eyesore and pay the fine. It would be easier for everyone." "Easier for you, you mean?" I replied. "I'll see you at the hearing." The hearing was a joke. 5 board members sat at a table in the clubhouse, with Mrs. Harrington presiding. About 20 residents had come to watch, some sympathetic, others clearly on the board's side. I presented my case calmly. I showed my original permit. I explained that the shed had been there for decades without issue. I pointed out that several newer residents had similar structures that had never been questioned. Mrs. Harrington listened with a tight smile, then addressed the board. "While Mr. Jim here has a valid point about the age of his structure," she said, "rules are rules. The current bylaws are clear. All structures must comply with current standards and maintain valid permits. This shed fails on both counts." One of the newer board members spoke up. "But don't the original covenants protect older structures?" Mrs. Harrington waved her hand dismissively. "Those outdated documents were superseded years ago. We operate under the current bylaws now." I saw my opening. "With all due respect, those original covenants can only be changed by a 75% vote of all homeowners. That never happened. They're still valid." The room grew quiet. Mrs. Harrington's smile faltered for just a second. "We'll take a brief recess to deliberate," she announced. After 10 minutes they returned. I expected them to deny my appeal, but instead, Mrs. Harrington surprised me. "After careful consideration," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "the board has decided to give you an opportunity to come into compliance. If you apply for a new permit and pay the $500 application fee, we'll reduce the fine to $2,000. This was it, the false hope. They were pretending to be reasonable while still trying to squeeze money out of me. "I'll think about it," I said, not committing to anything. "If this HOA sounds unbelievable already, make sure to hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends." I left the hearing feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe they were coming around. Maybe I could just pay the smaller fine and be done with it. 2 days later, I learned it was all a setup. I'd received a certified letter informing me that the 30-day compliance period had ended during the recess of my hearing, and the full $10,000 fine was now due immediately. If not paid within 10 days, they would place a lien on my property. That's when I got mad. These people weren't just enforcing rules. They were actively trying to push out long-time residents like me who couldn't afford to fight back. I called my grandson, who'd just finished law school. He came over that weekend with copies of every HOA document, covenant, and bylaw amendment from the past 30 years. We spent hours at my kitchen table, going through page after page of legalese. And then we found it, buried in the original 1989. Covenants was a section about community improvement areas. It stated that any resident could apply to convert a portion of their property into a space that benefited the community. Things like libraries, workshops, or community gardens. If approved, the HOA would provide a one-time grant of up to $15,000 to help with the conversion. Even better, these community improvement areas were exempt from all architectural restrictions and future bylaw changes. They were permanently protected. The covenants also stated that any rule changes needed to be presented at a community meeting where at least 50% of homeowners were present. A quick check of meeting minutes showed that almost every bylaw change for the past decade had been passed with fewer than 20% of homeowners in attendance, meaning they were technically invalid. "We've got them, Grandpa," my grandson said, grinning. "They've been operating outside their own rules for years." The plan started forming in my mind. Instead of just fighting the fine, I would turn this shed into something that would benefit the whole community and use the HOA's money to do it. First, I responded to their lien threat with a letter of my own, citing the invalid bylaw changes and the original covenant clause about community improvement areas. I gave them 10 days to drop the fine entirely. Their response was swift and nasty. They not only refused to drop the fine, but added another $5,000 in legal fees and threatened to foreclose on my home if I didn't pay in full within 30 days. That was their mistake. They showed their true colors, and now I had the motivation to fight back hard. My grandson helped me file a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Board, attaching all the documentation about the invalid bylaw changes. We also filed a lawsuit challenging the HOA's authority to enforce rules that had been improperly implemented. But the real masterstroke was my Community Improvement Area application. I proposed converting my shed into Lake Serenity Bait and Tackle Shop, a small bait shop where residents, especially kids, could get basic fishing supplies at cost. I'd run it myself, with all profits going to fund a free annual fishing derby for neighborhood children. According to the covenant, the HOA had 30 days to approve or deny this application. If they didn't respond, it was automatically approved. Mrs. Harrington must have realized she was cornered. She showed up at my door unannounced 2 days after I submitted the application. "Jim, we need to talk," she said. Not even bothering with fake politeness this time. "I'm listening," I said, leaning against my doorframe. "This little stunt with the bait shop, it's not going to work," she said. "The board will deny your application. According to the original covenants, you can't deny it if it benefits the community," I replied calmly. "And a free fishing derby for kids certainly qualifies. The original covenants are outdated," she snapped, losing her composure. "We don't have to follow them anymore." "Then why?" I asked, pulling out a copy of the complaint I'd filed. "Did the state HOA Oversight Board agree to review my complaint about your invalid bylaw changes?" The color drained from Mrs. Harrington's face. "You didn't." "I did," I said, "and I've also notified every homeowner in the community about what's been happening. Did you know that over 50 of them have already agreed to come to a special meeting to vote on removing the current board?" She stared at me, speechless for a moment. "You can't do this. This community needs structure, needs rules. It needs fairness," I corrected her. "It needs to respect the people who built this neighborhood, not push them out." She left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. The HOA board was desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. A week later, I came home to find county code enforcement officers examining my shed. Mrs. Harrington had apparently reported me for building code violations, claiming the shed was unsafe. "Sir, we've had a complaint about this structure," one of the officers said. "I'm not surprised," I replied. "The HOA doesn't like that I'm fighting their illegal fines." The officers were professional and thorough. They checked everything: electrical, I didn't have any; structural integrity, permits. After an hour, the lead officer approached me. "Whoever filed this complaint was wasting our time," he said. "This structure is perfectly sound. Better built than most new construction, actually." He handed me an official document stating that my shed was in full compliance with all county codes and regulations. This was the turning point. Word spread through the community about what the HOA was trying to do to me. Neighbors I'd known for years stopped by to offer support. Even some newer residents who hadn't realized what the board was doing expressed their concern. The special meeting I had requested was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The clubhouse was packed, standing room only. Every single homeowner had received a copy of the evidence against the current board. Mrs. Harrington and her cronies arrived looking confident, probably assuming they could out-talk or outmaneuver me. They were wrong. I didn't speak first. Instead, I let Mrs. Harrington take the floor and explain why the board's actions were justified. She talked about maintaining standards and protecting property values. She never once mentioned the $15,000 fine, the invalid bylaw changes, or her attempt to use county code enforcement against me. When she finished, I approached the podium. I didn't have a speech prepared. I just told my story. I moved here in 1992, I began. My wife and I chose this community because it felt like home. People looked out for each other. The HOA worked with residents, not against them. I held up my original shed permit. This shed has stood in my yard for 27 years. In all that time, no one ever complained. Not until this new board decided that rules only apply to some people. I went on to explain how the board had been violating the community's own covenants for years, how they had targeted long-time residents while allowing newer, wealthier ones to do as they pleased, and how they had tried to bully me into compliance with illegal fines and threats. Then I presented my vision for the bait shop and the free fishing derby. "This isn't about me anymore," I said. "It's about what kind of community we want to be. One that supports each other, or one that punishes people for minor infractions while ignoring its own major violations." The vote was held by secret ballot. When it was counted, the result was unanimous. The current board was removed, effective immediately. A temporary board was elected from residents who had been in the community for decades. Their first act? To vote unanimously to approve my community improvement area application and provide the $15,000 grant from the HOA's reserve fund. But the story doesn't end there. The former board, including Mrs. Harrington, refused to accept the outcome. They filed a lawsuit challenging the validity of the meeting and the vote. This could have dragged on for years, but my grandson had one more trick up his sleeve. During his research, he had discovered that the HOA's liability insurance had a clause excluding coverage for intentional acts or willful violations of governing documents. By knowingly enforcing invalid bylaws, the former board had voided their insurance coverage. When their attorney realized this, he advised them to drop the lawsuit and personally cover all legal fees. They did, and signed an agreement stating they would never again serve on the HOA board or interfere with its operations. The new board used the HOA's legal fund to establish a review process for all fines issued over the past 5 years. Over $100,000 in improper fines were returned to residents. As for me, I used that $15,000 grant to convert my shed into Lake Serenity bait and tackle. I kept it simple: basic supplies, live bait, and a small selection of tackle. I sold everything at cost, just as I had promised. The first annual Lake Serenity Kids Fishing Derby was held last summer. Over 70 children participated, all fishing for free. The HOA provided hot dogs and drinks, and several residents donated prizes. The bait shop has become a neighborhood gathering spot. Kids stop by after school to hear fishing stories. Parents come by to chat while picking up supplies for weekend fishing trips. It's exactly what this community used to be, a place where neighbors are friends. Oh, and that $10,000 fine? It was cancelled, of course. But in a way, I did turn it into profit. Not monetary profit, but something far more valuable. A stronger community, new friendships, and the satisfaction of knowing I stood up to bullies and won. Looking back, I'm almost grateful to Mrs. Harrington and her cronies. If they hadn't tried to push me around, I never would have discovered how to make my little shed into something that brings joy to so many people. I guess sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting those who wronged you. It's about turning their attempt to hurt you into something beautiful that benefits everyone else. And isn't that what community is all about? Thanks for watching my story. If you enjoyed this tale of HOA justice, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up to the little tyrants who try to ruin our neighborhoods. And don't forget to share your own HOA horror stories in the comments. I might feature one in a future video.